Heroes of the Storm Esports was the first ever game that I actually kind of branched out into after I was doing StarCraft for a long time, almost 4 years full-time on StarCraft. And then Heroes of the Storm came along, and it was one of the games that I navigated to pretty swiftly when it came to me wanting to do more in esports in general. Why was that? Well, we're going to talk about everything in terms of Heroes Esports and how it went down for me throughout the years from 2015, 16, 17, and 18. We're going to talk about where I even got my start in Heroes of the Storm Esports and just kind of what it all meant to me, this journey along the road as well. Welcome here to my vlogging setup. I'm very excited to start doing a few more videos in 2019, so let's see how things go. So let's start off with 2015 and where it all started for Heroes of the Storm Esports for me. Basically, I actually wasn't that interested in Heroes of the Storm at the very beginning of its lifespan in alpha and the like. What really got me interested in Heroes of the Storm at the very beginning was, I think it was I was at Gamescom for 2014. I think I was doing some StarCraft there, and I saw either the Chen and Anubarak or Chen and Azmodan build that they had at the venue at the time, and I played it. I had a little bit of a play around, and I realized all of a sudden, hey, this was very fun. I'd played League of Legends and Dota 2 for a bit before that, but nothing really stuck with me. I played a lot of Dota 2, maybe like 800 hours before actually going over to Heroes of the Storm. But Heroes of the Storm for me, as soon as I'd played it a little bit, I was like, wow, this actually does feel very fun. You know, the 20-minute matches, that's what I was really into at that time, because it just kind of, it drew me in a little bit better. It made me feel better about the wins and the losses, because sometimes you can get in some of those stalemates in MOBA games where, not necessarily stalemates, but unfortunately you would lose at the end of a 40-minute game knowing that you'd already lost like 20 minutes in, unless you make some miraculous comeback. But at least Heroes of the Storm kind of negated a little bit of that, which was really good for me. So as soon as I'd seen Heroes of the Storm in that capacity at Gamescom, seeing all this Chen and Azmodan, thinking, oh wow, all these cool heroes are guys that I want to play with, I decided I'll talk to ESL. Talk to ESL, see what their plans were with Heroes of the Storm coming up, because I worked there at the time full time, and it was the easiest road for me to get in to Heroes of the Storm. So I thought, what are we doing at ESL? Turns out ESL was doing Heroes Major League, which is in 2015, as the patch that I saw at Gamescom was in 2014. So I decided I want to cast it. I want to cast this game. By that time, there'd already been, you know, casters popping up here and there. Kaldor had done quite a bit of stuff. Solid Jake and the guys over in North America had done quite a lot as well. But EU really kind of only predominantly had Kaldor, I suppose, when it came to the online tournaments that were going on. And a lot of tournament organizers were very interested in taking on Heroes of the Storm, seeing how it was going to play out and stuff like that. So I started doing Major League. We had 3 seasons in 2015 with teams like Well Met, with Hasuobs and Soke. Soke, a previous StarCraft 2 legend, as well as Hasuobs, who obviously has been playing up until the point in 2018 where we're in this weird position now. El Nexo, if you think about it, the Spanish Armada themselves, and Lucifron and Vortex were playing there. They were playing with the Grand Paquette, Alistor as well in that team. There was G2, Acer, Team Acer, SK Gaming was there, with, I think, Bakery and Snitch were on that for a team for a long time. LDLC with a name called Black Scorp, if anybody remembers Black Scorp playing back in the day, and eventually Black Scorp was one of the players that was notorious for being very, very good on, say, Zeratul and Illidan, for example, and then eventually joined on with some of the other guys and created different teams and whatnot. So we did a few seasons of that. We did season 2, if you remember, with Arthur Stroitram, with people like BKB and stuff as well. And they were really into kind of the Tyrael Anubarak meta with Blood for Blood, where they'd just dive in and blow you up with Blood for Bloods. That was a crazy time as well. And actually, I do have a folder here that I can show you, which was all of my notes that I took throughout the entirety of me doing Heroes Major League, kind of like a learning process for me to get into the newer mind of a game. So throughout here, I had all of the talents for all of the heroes that I would kind of carry around with me so I could learn all the names and things like that, which was very useful. Jeez, some of these talents are very different. Searing attacks on Valor. What else? Nexus Frenzy, Blood for Blood on Valor. Blood for Blood on Valor. Wow, what a time. And then here would be the schedules of which matches were coming up, etc. What else do I have? I have a lot of drafts. Drafts. That I would write down because I didn't really want to... I believe to myself, basically, this is a draft of Season 1 Playoff Day 2, Heroes Major League, which was G2 versus LDLC. So lots and lots of notes. Massive amounts, as you can see here. And I used that for a long time to keep track of things, be able to kind of reference back to things as well, which for me, in a professional capacity, was very, very important indeed. So from there, obviously, after doing the Major League, Heroes then started taking on like proper LANs. There were 1 or 2 DreamHacks before that, but the first truly big LAN, apart from the kind of show match LAN that happened at BlizzCon the year before, was HWC in Prague. Obviously, there was a few things leading up to that, but for me, HWC in Prague was the first big one that really kind of stood out. Bob Question Mark, who were previously members from SK Gaming, then became Dignitas before going into that. You had Team Rockat, which was Hasselhobbs' team. You had Team Virtus Pro, which was basically Arthur Streut-Ram. You had Team Liquid, G2, Dignitas, Fnatic. What a tournament that was, guys. Prague was a phenomenal time, and to this day, I still believe it was one of the best stages in Heroes of the Storm, bar none. Very, very high up there. Very cool. The only slight problem is that our screens for the viewing audience there weren't central. They were on the sides. So you kind of, when the camera panned across the crowd, it looked like there was no one there, but everyone was just sat at the sides watching the screens, not in the center. So that was a little bit unfortunate. But casting my mind back to that, Navi winning, especially in the grand finals as well, with Kerrigan Butcher combos, which is something that we were just completely blown away by at the time, was something that was really, really cool. And then from there, where did I go? I did Heroes World Championship at BlizzCon in 2015, with Cloud9 winning, which was a thing in itself as well. I know a lot of North Americans out there will still always taunt the Europeans, saying, well, where's your World Championship? Where's your BlizzCon trophy? Well, Fnatic got a mid-season brawl later on, but we'll talk about that later on, of course. Cloud9 winning, defeating DK with Murky Abathur on Cursed Hollow. That was quite the memory in itself as well. Cloud9, I mean, call it cheese or whatever, it doesn't matter because it won. Beating out the big favorites in DK, the Koreans at the time, was a very exciting finish to it all. And we crowned a world champion, which was nice, which was indeed Cloud9. If you think back to that roster with Dunk Train, K1, King Caffeine, those guys, a very different roster to what Cloud9 eventually became later on. And then to round out 2015 for me, we had DreamHack Winter 2015, which was actually some of my first hosting ever in esports, which is kind of where I transitioned into more of that host role. And that in itself opens up a completely new chapter in my esports history as a whole. For the most part of that tournament, it was a bit of a stale meta. If you think about it, it was the same drafts, kind of Kael'Thas, Muradin, ETC, Falstad, every single draft. Very, very high up the picks. Sonya as well was in there. Team Liquid, towards the grand final, tried to make it a bit more interesting with things like Vikings picks, which was always exciting. Apologies if you can hear the siren in the background. But regardless of that, it was still a great time. And actually, I hosted the entirety of the tournament up until the grand final, because it was me, Todd, Grubby, and Kendrick, I think, and we were basically working 11, 12, 13-hour days. Todd was supposed to be casting the final with Grubby, and then Todd said he was tired, which, you know, he's French, that's how it works. And then I stepped in to do the finals alongside Grubby, and that was a very exciting time in the end. I think Fnatic won that over Team Liquid in victorious fashion. So that brings me to the end of 2015. Let's move on to 2016. All right, 2016, before HGC was truly HGC, we started holding LANs like spring championships, summer championships, fall championships, and there were regionals that were leading up to that as well. My 2016 really started when it came to Katowice, and that was actually where I really started to get my feet wet with hosting. So it was an exciting time for me to be able to get to kind of move away from the casting stage a little bit and focus more on running the show, which has its ups and downs. I still do enjoy, I would say, commentating over hosting, but it was something that felt required, and I felt at least I had the experience in esports and on desks in shows, etc., to be able to be that person that propelled the show in the right direction. So 2016 Katowice, as I said, I think we had Wolf there. I think we flew in some of the Americans. We had Kaldor there as well. And that was a Dignitas win. That was where Dignitas really kind of started the ball rolling with all of these regionals that they would constantly win up until towards the very end of Heroes of the Storm. And that's actually where, in a LAN setting, the scary Stitches was truly born for Dignitas. They would have drafts and things like that, but then whenever things got a little bit dire, they would draft out the Stitches. JPL would pull in those hooks and always make it work, which was exciting. And also, one thing to note that throughout 2016 as well, there was discussions back and forth with not only me, but also Blizzard, about trying out Kendrick as a host. And for quite a few tournaments during 2016, Kendrick was actually in that host role, even though at the time I would say that I was better at the host role, but I still did want to commentate, and that was a very important distinction there to be able to make. No offense to Kendrick, of course, he's a great guy, but he knows those power levels as well, I suppose. I love you, Kendrick. So it was nice to always have Kendrick there at some of the tournaments as well. I think even coming into one of the mid-season brawls, or even I think it was the summer championship, he was actually in the host role, which we'll get onto in a little bit. I should keep this a bit shorter. Geez, even 2015 was only like 10 minutes long. All right, anyway, so throughout the year, Blizzard was trying out Kendrick. That was one thing that was important. I got the opportunity in 2016 as well, through all of those regionals, to not only focus on the EU events, but I also got to do the North American events as well, which was kind of cool. So I kind of bridged the border, as it were, and I was the only talent to be able to get the opportunity to do that. So I was very thankful for that, be it in a commentating capacity or be it in a hosting capacity, which I predominantly did over in America. If you think back to the North American regional that we had in Austin at DreamHack, and then also we did one in the ESL studio later on in the year, which was very cool. And that's actually one of the tournaments where I first got to meet J-How as well, who I believe is one of the brighter prospects to come out of the Heroes of the Storm world when it comes to on-air talent. So let's move on briefly to the Spring Championships in Seoul. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, James, you didn't go to the Spring Championships in Seoul, and in 2016, you are correct, I did not go. Now, one thing that was interesting about that was OGN actually reached out to me a few weeks before that show, a few weeks, few months, whatever it may be, and said that they were interested in using me for the show. And I was like very excited because, one, I'd never worked with OGN. Two, I'd watched OGN for years and years because of StarCraft, etc., and stuff like that. So I was super excited about going to the World Championships for the Spring Championship in Seoul. And then I was told by Blizzard that I wasn't required, which is a bit unfortunate. And the specific reason for that was that they told me that I didn't have the expertise over some of the other commentators that they wanted there. I disagree with that assertion, but it's their prerogative. That's what they want to do. But regardless, water under the bridge, it was 2016, who cares? So moving on from that, we did some of the DreamHack All-Star stuff, which was the second World Championship of the year, in inverted commas, because Spring Championship was a World Championship. So coming into that was effectively the first ever mid-season brawl. If you think about the heritage now of the mid-season brawl in 2017, 2018. It's undoubtedly one of the very best tournaments, one of the pinnacle tournaments of Heroes Esports that there ever was. And realistically, that all started at DreamHack All-Stars 2016 over at DreamHack Summer. And that was very exciting to be part of. Not only the format was cool, but also we got to see the Koreans do very well at that tournament. If you think back to, I think it was MVP Black versus Tempest in the grand final there. And Tempest actually won. I thought that MVP was going to turn it around in that series because they picked a Tracer, I think it was, on Cursed Hollow, and during that time I thought, well, if they keep doing that, maybe they can kind of pull this series back. But no, Tempest was victorious, and actually one of the players on Tempest is kind of very near and dear to my heart, and was Duck Duck, who back in StarCraft 2 was actually a champion himself there as well, a champion of WCS Europe. And Duck Duck has an alternate story to him as well. Back in WCS Europe, it was him versus a big fan favorite Korean. Duck Duck was a relatively faceless Korean at the time, and he won WCS Europe, and everyone was like, well, you know, that's how it goes. But when Duck Duck was presented the trophy and the check, he started crying. He started bawling his eyes out, and ever since then, people had a deep affinity with someone like Duck Duck, and it was fantastic to be able to see him getting a second championship when it came to the DreamHack Summer Championships that we had in 2016. So that was really cool. And then between then, again, we had some of the regionals that I was doing with Europe and North America. And then we move on to the BlizzCon Fall Championship, which is the first time I ever got the opportunity to host a BlizzCon. I think I was kind of 50-50 hosting this BlizzCon, because I was being a bit stubborn. I wasn't ready to step fully into those host shoes just yet, which I eventually came around to the idea of, because it just seemed like the right thing to do. It was better to have one host drive the show compared to jumping around between hosts, not having kind of a sense of stability throughout the show, and eventually I did take that on. But for this one, 2016, I was not full-time host. I was part host, part commentator. And that was the Fall Championship. That was where Ballistics won over Fnatic, I think it was. So that was cool in itself at the very final. Fnatic, I think, before had defeated MVP, and that was a unforgettable series. And then of course it was Ballistics versus Fnatic on Warhead Junction, where Ballistics was absolutely battering Fnatic in that series. But Warhead Junction, I think we all remember that at the very top of the boss with the nukes. That was something truly special in Heroes of the Storm esports as a whole. And that kind of brings me to the end of 2016. I realized that 2015 was a little bit long, so I'm trying to get this a bit shorter so everyone doesn't lose their minds. So let's move on to 2017 here and see what's what, because that was one of my busiest years when it came to how many days we were doing Heroes of the Storm for myself. All right, let's talk about 2017. Before I do that, though, I did forget, for that Fall Championship, I brought some of my notebooks along as well here for the show and tell. And this is actually the notebook that I used during the Fall Championship at the end of 2016. So lots and lots of notes, of course, and lots of drafts and things like that. But the art on the front was particularly cool. That's nice. So there you go. I thought I'd show you that along the way. Okay, 2017, let's do this. So, going into 2017, Blizzard wanted to make HGC. They wanted to make the leagues, and they approached a lot of commentators as well with the opportunity to be able to go and do HGC full-time over in California. Now, I had a few meetings about this, and I've been on record online to be able to say this multiple times. So the long story short of all of that was I was offered a position at HGC to be there full-time for the league. I was working with ESL full-time at the time, and we determined between ourselves that the offer just wasn't enough money, which is a bit of a shame because I was really excited about Heroes of the Storm Esports, maybe doing it full-time as well, but it didn't come to fruition. Both parties separated, went their opposite ways. You know, there was no animosity between us, just a business is business thing, and that is totally fine. And however, even though I was not doing it full time, Kaldor was then doing it full time, and he was applying for a visa. So during that first couple of weeks, he was unable to go to America whilst applying for a visa. I think overall they just left it a little bit late getting all of this stuff sorted out going into 2017. That's esports, guys. That's how these things go. And so I had to come in for 5 weeks to do HGC, the league for Europe. And I was very excited about doing that for multiple reasons. One, I'd already done a league format in WCS in StarCraft 2. So I had, and that was back maybe 2014, 15, I guess. And I had all of these ideas bubbling around in my head about what I would do in another league format. You'd be seeing me kind of week in, week out, what I would do, what gimmicks I would bring to the table, what extra content we could do around it. So my objective, aside from doing the commentary and making the commentary good and presenting the stories in a well-fashioned manner, was gimmicks, trying to make each broadcast feel different, trying to bring something different to the table. So stupid things like one episode of HGC, we would do hashtag tricks wacky meta, you know, that kind of stuff. One episode, we would make other hashtags for people to get involved in. I coined the phrase the big three in Europe when it came to, I think it was Team Liquid, Dignitas, and Fnatic as 3 teams. And that is a trend that ran through as to kind of build a story narrative. So kind of small things like that were very important to me when looking at a league focus. And it was 5 weeks in America. It was fantastic. It was really fun for me to work on that project for the full 5 weeks. I was living out of a hotel. That was a bit weird because that's the longest I've ever stayed in a hotel, 5 weeks worth. And I was kind of separated away from everybody else at Blizzard because it was in Manhattan Beach was the studio. Blizzard office HQ was about an hour away. Once a week, we would go into Blizzard HQ to kind of have a meeting and kind of look over stuff. We sometimes did VOD reviews, and I also did it with Robert Wing as well. And I tried to, because out of the 4 people that were full-time on the project at the time, me, Trixler for EU, Dread and Gillyweed for NA, I was the most experienced, so I tried to look over people's VODs and stuff like that and give some advice here and there, try and tell people how to shape some of their presentation when it came to, say, a small tip. For example, when you're looking at a schedule, start at the very bottom of the schedule and work your way up. That way, when you get to the very top, which is your first fixture of the day, then you have an easy transition going into that fixture, as it will be your next topic, for example, which is nice. So that happened. The one thing that I always didn't like about HGC at the time, and I said it many times to people that were working there, it was very, very important for me to see this for HGC to succeed, was supporting content, was again the kind of the gimmicks, the interesting little tidbits that would happen during shows, like things that are unexpected is the most important phrase to use. So stuff like that me and Trick were doing, like I would try and throw in things that were unexpected, stupid things, right? But those things that are unexpected are the things that people tune in for. Not necessarily the games. People are tuning in for the games, do not get me wrong, but people are also tuning in for the memes, right? Especially in league format, people are tuning in for every other little thing that goes on around the games. And HGC lacked that, unfortunately. Which didn't exactly assist it in success, as it were. So I always wanted to see more of that. I always wanted to see... One of the greatest examples was the Kaldor and Trixler walking around thing, and then Dahaka drags Kaldor into a bush and Trixler walks away. Make one of those each week. Make 2 of those each week and show them during your broadcast. That kind of stuff is gold. And actually, I think... you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think KO was one of the guys that actually made that, and I think it was the single thing that gained the most traction on their Twitter, like, period. So it shows that that kind of content is stuff that people want, and that kind of content is things that spice things up a little bit more to be able to push your project forwards. So anyway, yeah. Actually, 2017 was a bit weird because I did that 5 weeks for HGC, and then from there on, I really didn't do much else. I have a few other tournaments that go on, but before we finish things, obviously, the belt, the lovely belt that we got during HGC is very important. And also another thing that people really didn't see too well, but is this actually an American football that they the entire crew signed. Dread. Oh no. The entire crew signed for me and gave me. So see Steve's on here. Who else is on here that I can see? I can't quite make them out. My eyes are going, but it was a very kind gift and something that I will treasure forever after only doing the 5 weeks of HGC, but it was a really nice time. It was really nice. So that is that. And also, something that the Blizzard community team sent me was this after doing HGC. You can see that Kaelaris, the cursor, because of all my 1% cores. And then on the other side, there is a 1% core. And the community team all signed that for me. Very kind, isn't it? Very, very nice. Yeah, so filling in, very nice stuff. I love that. Okay, I just kind of keep all this stuff. It's really cool to have. So again, continuing on, 2017 mid-season brawl. This mid-season brawl for me really set the standard. If you think about the best of 2 format from the groups, truly really was properly embraced here. Very, very powerful. Really cool to be able to get to see all of the teams play one another. We were in one of the DreamHack studios, which was boiling. I am not good in hot weather whatsoever, but we had a lot of fun with it regardless. And this was the tournament that really kind of broke the status quo of South Korea winning the past couple of world championships, but really showing their dominance in 2016 and at the start of 2017 as well, because this is the tournament where Dignitas were the Korean killers. They completely wiped out the Koreans. MVP L5 didn't really stand much of a chance against Dignitas in this tournament, and then Fnatic versus Dignitas in the finals. And I think everybody in the back was kind of biting their nails. The North Americans weren't, because they weren't in the final, so it doesn't matter. But the Europeans were. The Europeans were like, oh, who's going to win? And in the end, Fnatic defeating Dignitas 4-3 was something that was very magical, very momentous, and something that Fnatic, especially being a full Swede roster at the time, will remember forever. We were in Sweden. They won basically a world championship. And that was very exciting for them. And then from there, I did Western Clash 2 in Kiev. It was the first time I'd ever worked with Glaurung, who's an interesting individual. I want to say. Sometimes he's a bit of a he's like a hyper hamster. Let's say that. And then obviously we moved on to BlizzCon 2017, which was the HGC 2017 finals, which was truly like I was full-time hosting at this point. There was not much commentary, maybe like 1 or 2 series, but that's about it. And MVP Black, which were they MVP Black or Genji at the time? Maybe they were Genji. But anyway, regardless, they claimed their title back, which was very important because obviously they'd had a bad mid-season brawl, and you could tell that they weren't very motivated with the game at the time, but then kind of realizing that they've been knocked off their perch with mid-season brawl 2017, they knew they had to kind of rekindle that fire and get back on top, and they definitely did when it came to the HGC final in 2017, which was exciting in itself. This actually marked one of the worst finishes, I think it was, for Dignitas in a LAN setting in the history of Heroes of the Storm. If you think about them getting first place constantly at every single regional, semi-finals constantly, even getting to a final before as well when it came to World Championships. I think they got 5th through 8th. They were in the quarterfinals here. So unfortunately for Dignitas, kind of a fall from grace there. But also Fnatic didn't even get to the LAN placement. Did they? Also marked Fnatic's fall from grace when it came to LAN placements after they didn't hit another final. Oh no, they were they in a final? Anyway, regardless, it doesn't matter. I'm gonna breeze over that for now. The point is that I really wanted to focus on the fact that Dignitas had a bad performance, and it was really unfortunate for them. I think it was maybe Fnatic in the final of that, but anyway, regardless, that's 2017. I think I got this mask in 2017? No, that's 2018. But it was a really cool mask. All right, I'm gonna see you in 2018 in a moment. We'll see you in a bit. That brings us on to 2018, where actually I really didn't do much Heroes Esports in 2018. The one show I got to do was hosting the mid-season brawl, which again, I think overall, mid-season brawls, BlizzCons, regionals, championships, everything, mid-season brawls every single year were my absolute favorite tournaments for Heroes of the Storm, and I was very happy to be able to get the opportunity to do it again. Just thinking back to that tournament as a whole, it was really cool to see Gen G be as dominant as they were throughout the entirety of the tournament, up until the very final, where Team Dignitas kind of took them to the very edge and were unable to kind of close it out. It was 4-3 again, but Gen G even stated that Dignitas, it was the only team that they were truly scared of in the tournament. And even though they 3-0'd them in the semi-finals, they eventually got into that grand finals. And again, it was 4-3. It was very close after Dignitas had gone through Tempest in 3-1 fashion in the lower bracket grand final. And guys, that's pretty much it for me for Heroes Esports in terms of the tournaments I did. I just want to take this moment here, since I don't think at this point in time I'm going to be doing any more Heroes Esports, to kind of special mentions, shout outs for people through Heroes Esports that I've met. Obviously a lot of players and a lot of names that I'm probably not going to say here, but there's tons of people that I met along the road, which was great in itself. Some of the guys I really want to mention are Josh, the actual the director over at HGC, is a guy that I really appreciate and came to appreciate whilst I was over there for the 5 weeks of HGC that I was doing, which was exciting. And we got on like a house on fire, so that was really cool. And I miss Josh. He's a cool dude. Bakery and Snitch, of course, my Brits are two guys that I really kind of fell in love with throughout all of this road here for Heroes Esports, and that was really cool to be able to kind of get to interact with them, because Brits are kind of rubbish at esports and normally we don't really do too much. So those guys became kind of lifelong friends, as it were. Got Gillyweed as well, who, I'll be honest, at the very beginning of things, I was a little bit critical of her abilities when it came to commentating and hosting and stuff like that. But for me, in my mind, she is one of the most improved talents when it came to esports, and she's moving on now. She's going to be doing a lot of Rocket League stuff and probably other shows as well. So I'm very excited for Gillyweed and the future prospects that she has available to her. Jay Howe is another guy that I think really truly showed that he has got a very good camera presence and a very good work ethic as well in Heroes of the Storm, and I expect big things of him later on down the line, as long as he can kind of get himself embedded in some of the esports. It's not actually easy to transition between esports, but it's something that if you work hard on it and things like that, you can actually get it done, which is cool. Trixler as well, from casting with him over in HGC Europe, is another guy that I want to shout out because it was a lot of fun. At the beginning of 2017 HGC, he was one of the guys that I said I would like to work with him, because I think he has a good positive attitude, and I think that carried on with him from his personal streams. Sometimes he can get a bit salty, but his personal streams, etc. and stuff were really cool. And then finally, Dreadnought, the guy that I think out of everybody in Heroes of the Storm could do most with his talents and his abilities going forwards into other esports, as long as he dedicates himself to it. He can get very dedicated when he gets down to it, and sometimes a bit over passionate, gets very flary and angry, but that's part of Dread. You've seen it on broadcasts. You know how he gets when he has an idea in his mind and he wants people to be able to execute it perfectly in the way he wants to see it. But yeah, definitely I have high hopes for Dreadnought moving forwards as well. What's going on in esports for Heroes of the Storm coming up? That's very important as well, as you've got the EU Nexus contest coming up. which you guys want to look out for. I think it happens between January the 8th and the 20th. Heroes Lounge tournaments are going to be going on as well, and kind of they keep going on throughout all of this stuff. So make sure to tune into those if you kind of want to sate your Heroes Esports kind of thirst. China Gold Series is going to continue going on as well. And I also know a few other people who are looking to provide some Heroes Esports kind of down the line, or trying to kind of find extra things to happen for Heroes Esports as a whole. So overall, HGC was an exciting time for a lot of people. All the tournaments that happened in the past were exciting as well. Unfortunately, for a good portion of those lands, they've kind of come to an end. But that is going to be that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. My name's Kaelaris. Make sure to subscribe here as well and check me out on all the social media things. Sorry this ended up like a huge video. I didn't expect it to go on this long, but and if you've lasted this long, well played as well. I'll try and find my dog to reward you by introducing you to Fluff. So I'll be right back. This is your reward for sticking with me all this time. This is Floof. Isn't she the cutest little Floof? I can't believe. Flight Lieutenant Ola Olafsson Ferdinand, and she's very tired. She's a tired puppy. Look at the camera. There you go. So, well done, Floof. Congratulations. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for tuning in. And I'll be doing more videos soon. See you in a bit. Bye-bye. Bye-bye-bye.